My wife forged my signature to give everything to our favorite daughter, but when I exposed the 30-year betrayal, the judge destroyed them, and I revealed their scheme to the entire family. I'm 58 years old. I own a home renovation company that I built from scratch, and what I discovered a few months ago about my wife and my youngest daughter basically destroyed everything I thought I knew about my family. And when I say everything, I mean almost 30 years of marriage, the trust I had in the person I shared my life with, and even the way I saw my own daughter. The truth is, I'm still struggling to process all of this, but I need to tell it because there are days when I feel like I'm going to go crazy if I don't get it out. I guess I should start at the beginning, or at least at a point that makes sense. I grew up in poverty, like really poor, the kind where sometimes you didn't know if there was going to be dinner that night. My father worked whatever he could, and my mother cleaned houses, and I swore that when I had kids, they would never go through the same thing. I worked like an animal from the age of 16, saved every penny, learned the construction business from the bottom, literally sweeping floors and carrying materials. By 28, I had my own small renovation company, and by the time I turned 35, we had contracts all over the city. I didn't become a millionaire or anything like that, but I built something solid, something to be proud of. You know what I mean? I met Ruth when I was like 29. She worked at a real estate agency, and we crossed paths on one of my projects. She was sweet, smart, ambitious, and we got married a year later. We had Patrick first, then Alexandra 3 years later, and finally Tiffany when Patrick was already like 7 years old. All 3 kids grew up well, or so I thought. Patrick was always independent, one of those kids who don't cause problems, got good grades, and from a young age knew what he wanted. Alexandra, too, super responsible, decided to be a teacher because she loved working with kids. But Tiffany, oh God, Tiffany was different from the start. I don't know exactly when it started, but Ruth developed this thing with Tiffany, where she basically treated her like she was made of glass and would break if we asked her to do anything. Patrick had to do his chores, Alexandra too, but Tiffany always had an excuse. That she was tired, that she didn't feel well, that it was too hard for her. And Ruth always defended her. I tried to set limits, but Ruth made me feel like the bad guy. Like, you're too hard on her, Raymond. She's just a kid. She'll mature eventually. But she never matured. You know? Never. When Patrick graduated from college he got a job and moved to his own apartment at 23. Alexandra did the same, left at 24 when she started teaching. But Tiffany, who's now 25, was still living at home. She tried going to college like 3 times and always dropped out after the first semester. She tried different jobs, lasted maximum 2 months at each one before quitting because, according to her, the boss was mean, or the coworkers were toxic, or the schedule was impossible. There was always a reason, always. And Ruth was always there with money, buying her things, paying for her gas, her phone, everything. I talked to Ruth about this constantly. I'd tell her, we're creating a monster. I'd tell her, we're not doing her any favors keeping her like this. But she'd respond that I didn't understand, that Tiffany just needed more time, that she was more sensitive than the other 2. Patrick and Alexandra saw it too, and would comment to me about it, but what could I do? She was my wife. She was their mother. Supposedly we were on the same team. Or so I thought. Like 6 months ago, I was working from home, which I don't do very often because normally I'm at the sites, but that day I had to review some budgets and make calls. Ruth had gone out somewhere. I think she said something about going to the salon or the supermarket. I don't really remember. The thing is, I needed to print some documents, and my printer was out of ink. So I went to the office Ruth has in the house to use. Hers. Her laptop was open on the desk. I wasn't snooping or anything. I was just going to connect my USB and print what I needed. But the screen was on, and there was a document open. And the title of the document was something like Last Will and Testament, revised, and I saw my name there. Raymond Henderson. Obviously, it caught my attention because I had a will. We had done it together years ago with a lawyer, and I didn't remember reviewing anything recently. So yeah, I read it. And man, what I read left me frozen. It was basically a new will where everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. The house, The business, my savings, my investments, my retirement accounts. Absolutely everything was left in Tiffany's name. Not to the 3 kids in equal parts like it was in our original will. Not a percentage for Ruth and the rest divided. No, everything to Tiffany. Patrick and Alexandra weren't even mentioned, except to say specifically that they would receive nothing. I sat there like an idiot trying to understand what I was seeing. I scrolled down in the document and there it was, a signature, my signature, or something that was supposed to be my signature. And it was dated like 2 months ago. 2 months during which I definitely hadn't signed any new legal documents or gone to any notary or anything like that. I don't know how long I sat there staring at that screen. I could have been 5 minutes or an hour. Honestly, I have no idea. The only thing I was thinking was, this can't be real. There has to be an explanation. Maybe it's a draft of something for someone else. Maybe Ruth works in real estate and is helping someone. But no, it had my name. It had my information. It had our house address. The names of my 3 kids, even though only Tiffany was going to inherit anything. I took photos of the document with my phone. I don't know why. I just felt like I needed to have evidence of what I was seeing because my brain still wasn't processing it completely. Then I closed everything as it was and went back to my office. I didn't print anything. I sat at my desk trying to breathe normally because I felt like I was going to have a heart attack. Ruth arrived like 2 hours later with grocery bags, all normal, asking me if I wanted some lunch. I was there trying to act casual, but inside I was a total mess. I told her I wasn't hungry, that I had a lot of work, and she went to the kitchen to put things away. I was just thinking, do I confront her now? Do I wait? Do I call a lawyer first? What the hell do I do? I decided to wait until night. I needed time to calm down a bit because if I said something to her at that moment, I was probably going to explode in a way that wasn't going to be productive. So I waited. We had dinner. Well, she had dinner. I basically moved food around on my plate. We were watching TV and I couldn't concentrate on anything. And finally, when it was like 10 at night, I said, "Ruth, we need to talk." She looked at me like, "Uh-oh," with that face you make when you know something serious is coming, I said. "I found something on your laptop today. A document. A will. With my name and my signature." And her face went white, like all the blood drained from her face in a second. She tried to say something, but I said, "No, let me finish. Did you forge my signature on a legal document? Did you make a fake will, leaving everything to Tiffany and nothing to Patrick and Alexandra?" What followed was probably the most horrible conversation of my life. At first, Ruth tried to deny it, saying I misinterpreted what I saw, that it was just a draft, that it didn't mean anything. But when I showed her the photos on my phone, she couldn't keep lying. She started crying. Not that sad crying, but that crying like when you know you got caught and don't know how to get out of the situation. And then she started with the excuses. That she did it because Tiffany needed more help than the other 2. That Patrick and Alexandra were already established and had good jobs and weren't going to need my money. That Tiffany was more vulnerable, more fragile. That without that money she wasn't going to be able to survive. That it was her responsibility as a mother to make sure Tiffany was well taken care of. That I didn't understand, because I was a man, and men don't understand these emotional things. I said, "Ruth, you forged my signature. That's a crime. That's fraud. Do you understand the gravity of what you did?" And she kept going on about how she did it out of love, that she did it for our daughter, that someday I was going to understand. I asked her if Tiffany knew about this, and she went quiet, which gave me the answer. Obviously, she knew. I didn't sleep that night. Ruth went to the guest room crying, and I stayed in our bedroom, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what the hell had happened to my life. At what point had the woman I'd been married to for almost 30 years become someone capable of doing something like this? At what point had my youngest daughter become so selfish and manipulative that she agreed to steal their inheritance from her own siblings? The next morning, I called my lawyer, Barry, who's handled my legal stuff for years. I told him everything, and he was silent for a long moment before saying, "Raymond, this is serious. Very serious." He told me we needed to act fast, that I should get that original document if I could. that we needed forensic evidence of the signature forgery, that we had to secure my assets immediately before they tried to do anything else. The next few days were crazy. Barry connected me with a forensic document expert who analyzed the signature on that fake will versus my real signatures on other documents. He confirmed what we already knew, that it definitely wasn't my signature, that someone had tried to copy it, but there were clear differences in the pressure of the strokes, the angles, all that technical stuff they analyze. Meanwhile, I moved money to new accounts that were only in my name, changed passwords for everything, put alerts on my bank and credit accounts. Ruth knew something was happening, but didn't know exactly what. I barely talked to her, only what was necessary. She tried to act like nothing had happened, making dinner, asking me about my day, but I couldn't even look at her without feeling this mix of rage and sadness eating away at me inside. This was the person I had built a life with whom I'd had 3 children, with whom I'd been through all kinds of good and bad times, and she had betrayed me in the most calculated way possible. One afternoon, like a week after the initial discovery, I decided to follow Ruth. Sounds bad. I know, but I needed to know what else was going on. She left the house saying she was going to the bank and to run some errands. I followed her in my work truck, keeping enough distance so she wouldn't see me. She didn't go to the bank. She went straight to Tiffany's apartment, that apartment we were paying for because obviously she couldn't pay for it herself. I parked on the street and waited. Like half an hour later, Ruth came out of the building, carrying what looked like papers or documents in a brown folder. She looked nervous, looking around before getting in her car. I didn't follow her back. I already knew what I needed to know. They were planning something together, or still planning something. There was no other explanation. That night, after Ruth fell asleep, or at least closed the door of the guest room where she now slept, I called Patrick. I told him everything. He was quiet for a good while, and then just said, "Dad, I always knew Mom spoiled Tiffany too much, but I never thought it would get to this." He sounded hurt and angry at the same time. I told him I was going to call Alexandra too, that they needed to know what was happening. Alexandra cried when I told her. Not dramatically, but that quiet crying that's worse because a person is really devastated. She said she had always tried to have a good relationship with Tiffany, despite everything. That she had tried to be a good older sister. And now, she was finding out that Tiffany had agreed to basically erase her and Patrick from my life, and from anything I could leave them. On Barry's advice, I installed discreet security cameras in my home office and in the living room. I didn't feel good doing it, like it felt like something paranoid and extreme, but Barry insisted we needed to document everything just in case. I also moved all my important documents, all the business papers, property titles, everything, to a safe in Barry's office. And it turned out that installing those cameras was a good idea, because like 3 days later, they captured something that confirmed everything I suspected. Ruth was on the phone in the living room, thinking I was at a work site when I had actually come back early, and the camera recorded her entire conversation. She was talking to Tiffany. She was saying things like, "Don't worry, honey. We're going to find a way. Patrick and Alexandra don't need that money anyway. You're my priority." And then she said something that froze my blood. She said, "If your father doesn't cooperate, we're going to have to find another way. Maybe we can say he was confused when he made the original will, or that he wasn't in his right mind. My lawyer says there are ways to contest these things." Her lawyer? Ruth had gone to see a lawyer without telling me. She was looking for ways to take control of my own assets away from me. With my own daughter. It was surreal, like something you see in a bad Lifetime movie but never think will happen to you. I decided it was time to act. I called Patrick and Alexandra and asked them to come to the house on a Saturday morning. I told them to bring their partners if they wanted support. Ruth asked what was happening and I told her it was a family meeting, that we all needed to talk together. She got nervous immediately, asking if she should call Tiffany. I told her no, that this was just for the 4 of us first. When Patrick and Alexandra arrived, we sat in the dining room, that dining room where we'd had so many family dinners, so many birthday and graduation and Christmas celebrations. Now we were there for this. I played the recording for everyone, including Ruth. Patrick looked angrier than I'd ever seen him. Alexandra just cried silently. Ruth tried to explain, to justify, saying the conversation had been taken out of context, that it wasn't what it seemed. I showed them everything: the fake will, the forensic analysis, the records that Ruth had consulted with a lawyer about how to contest my real will. Patrick said to Ruth, "How could you do this to us? We're your children too." And Ruth, instead of apologizing or showing remorse, said, "You two are fine. You have good jobs and stable lives. Tiffany needs me more." That's when Alexandra exploded. She told Ruth, "Tiffany needs you more because you made her that way. You turned her into someone who can't do anything for herself. And instead of helping her grow, you're trying to steal their inheritance from your own family to keep her dependent on you forever." It was harsh, but it was true. I told Ruth I had talked to my lawyer and was going to file for legal separation, that I could no longer trust her, that what she had done was unforgivable. She started screaming that I was breaking up the family, that I was choosing two children over another, that I was a terrible father. Patrick stood up and said, "No, Mom, you broke this family when you decided to forge Dad's signature and conspire with Tiffany to rob us." Ruth left the house that same afternoon. She packed some things and went to Tiffany's apartment. And so began what was probably the ugliest period of all this. The legal separation papers were served to Ruth like a week later. And then the smear campaign started. Ruth and Tiffany called all the extended family, friends, neighbors, telling their version of the story, that I was a controlling tyrant, that I had always hated Tiffany, that I was having a midlife crisis, and that's why I was destroying my family, that Patrick and Alexandra had poisoned me against them. All kinds of lies and manipulations. But I had evidence. Photos of the fake document, the forensic report, the audio recordings. So, when people called me to confront me or ask me what was happening, I shared everything. My sister, Ruth's sister, my friends from work, everyone. And one by one they started to see the truth. Ruth's sister basically stopped talking to her when she saw the evidence. My friends were shocked. The neighbors Ruth had tried to convince sought me out to apologize for having doubted me. Ruth and Tiffany didn't give up easily. Like 2 months after the separation, they filed a petition in court trying to invalidate my real will and enforce the fake one. They claimed I had verbally promised to leave everything to Tiffany, that the fake will reflected my true intentions. A whole series of ridiculous arguments that their lawyer clearly knew weren't going to work, but filed anyway because they were paying him. We had to go to court. Seeing Ruth and Tiffany sitting on the other side of the room with their lawyer was surreal. This was my wife. This was my baby daughter, the one I had carried when she was a little girl, who I had taught to ride a bike, with whom I had gone to father-daughter dances. And now she was trying to rob me. Literally trying to take everything I had worked for decades. The judge reviewed all the evidence. The forensic analysis showing the signature was fake. The testimonies of Patrick and Alexandra. The audio recordings. The records that I had never gone to any notary or signed any new documents. And he basically dismissed Ruth and Tiffany's case in about 10 minutes. He told them it was one of the most flagrant attempts at fraud he had seen, that if I wanted I could press criminal charges, and that they should consider themselves lucky that I was only seeking to separate legally and not put them in jail. Ruth looked destroyed when we left the courthouse. Tiffany looked angry, like the world owed her something and everyone was being unfair to her. They didn't even try to talk to me. They just left. The divorce was finalized like 3 months ago. Ruth got what the judge considered fair, based on the years of marriage and state laws, but nowhere near what she and Tiffany had wanted. The house stayed in my name because I had bought it before we got married and had paid the mortgage with money from the business that was only mine. The business obviously stayed in my name because it was mine from before the marriage, too. Now I'm here, in this house that feels too big and too empty, trying to rebuild something like a normal life. Patrick comes to visit me almost every weekend, sometimes just to watch a football game or help me with something around the house. Alexandra comes when she can, brings her boyfriend. We cook together. We're healing, I guess, although it still hurts. Tiffany still lives in her apartment, which Ruth now pays for alone with her part of the divorce settlement. I heard through the grapevine that Tiffany tried to get a job again, but quit after a month because the schedule was too early or something like that. Ruth keeps giving her money, keeps enabling her, and honestly, it's not my problem anymore. I know it sounds harsh, but I spent years trying to make Ruth see what she was doing, years warning that this was going to end badly, and she didn't listen to me. She chose one daughter over her entire family, over her marriage, over doing the right thing. Sometimes I wonder if I could have done something different. If I should have been firmer with Ruth about Tiffany when they were girls. If I should have insisted more on family therapy or setting clearer boundaries. But the truth is, I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. And Ruth made her choices. Tiffany made her choices. I can't control that. I can only control how I respond. What hurts me most isn't the money or the house or any of those material things. It's the loss of the family I thought I had. It's knowing that the woman I slept next to every night, who I had breakfast with every morning, was capable of betraying me in such a calculated and cold way. It's knowing that one of my daughters sees me only as a source of money and is willing to take from her own siblings to benefit herself. But I also found something in all this. I found that Patrick and Alexandra are incredible people who stayed on the side of what was right, even when it was difficult. I found that there are people in my life who really know me and support me. I found that I'm stronger than I thought, that I can survive something I thought was going to destroy me. The business is fine, better than ever actually, because now I can focus completely on it without the distractions and the drama. I'm thinking of making Patrick and Alexandra partners eventually, when they're ready. They are my future. They are my real legacy. Not the money or the properties, but the good and hardworking people they became despite everything. Last week, Patrick called me to tell me that he and his girlfriend are getting married. He asked me if I was going to be with him through the whole process of planning the wedding, if I was going to be there for him. And I told him, of course, that nothing would make me happier. And we were silent for a moment before he said, "Thank you for fighting for us, Dad, for not leaving us behind." And I broke down a little. I'm not going to lie, because that's the kind of recognition that really matters.